I have waited long enough. Your debt has overstayed its welcome.
Chief, please, just a little more time, I beg you.
No, I am done waiting. If the debt cannot be paid, then your son will marry my daughter.
No, please, Chief, not that. Anything but that.
Huh?
Yes, you will marry my daughter Amara. That is my final decision. 1 month. Decide or you lose everything you have left.
The air inside Chief Okoye's mansion was thick with silence, the kind of silence that pressed against the chest and made breathing feel like a burden. Amara sat quietly at the far end of the room, her large frame sinking into the chair beneath her, her eyes fixed on the floor, her fingers nervously clutching the edge of her dress. She did not speak. She never spoke when strangers were around. Years of whispers, stares, and silent judgments had taught her how to disappear, even while sitting in plain sight. Chief Okoye stood tall, his presence dominating the room, his eyes cold and calculating as he stared at the Obi family seated before him. Mr. Obi's hands trembled slightly on his knees, his once proud shoulders now bent under the weight of failure. Beside him, Mrs. Obi clutched her wrapper tightly, her lips quivering as fear slowly took over her entire body. Ikena stood behind them, tall, handsome, but visibly tense, his jaw clenched, his eyes moving from Chief Okoye to the silent figure of Amara, confusion written all over his face. No one spoke. The ticking of the clock on the wall sounded louder than it should, each second stretching the tension further. Then Chief Okoye finally broke the silence. "I have waited long enough," he said, his voice calm but heavy with authority. "Your debt has overstayed its welcome." Mr. Obi swallowed hard, his voice shaking as he tried to speak. "Chief, please, just a little more time, I beg you. I will pay, I promise." Chief Okoye raised his hand slightly, stopping him mid-sentence. "No," he said firmly, "I am done waiting." The room went still again. Even the air seemed to pause. Then, slowly, deliberately, Chief Okoye turned his gaze toward Amara, then back to Ikena. "If the debt cannot be paid," he continued, his voice now sharper, cutting through the silence like a blade, "then your son will marry my daughter." The words landed like thunder. Mrs. Obi let out a broken cry instantly, her body shaking as tears streamed down her face. "No, please, Chief, not that. Anything but that," she cried, her voice filled with desperation. Mr. Obi opened his mouth but no words came out, his face pale, his eyes wide with shock, as though the world had suddenly stopped making sense. Ikena stood frozen, his heart pounding violently against his chest, his ears ringing as he tried to process what he had just heard. "Marry her?" he repeated slowly, his voice low, filled with disbelief and rising anger. His eyes moved again to Amara, who still hadn't looked up, her silence louder than anything else in the room. Chief Okoye's expression did not change. "Yes," he said, "you will marry my daughter, Amara. That is my final decision. 1 month. Decide or you lose everything you have left." Before we continue with this life lesson story, kindly subscribe to support this channel. And now, come with me as I take you to the beginning where it all started and watch till the end to discover what fate awaits Ikena and Amara. Let's see how a forced marriage can stand the test of time. This is the story of Ikena and Amara. There was a time when the name Ikena carried pride, when people spoke it with admiration and quiet envy. He was everything a young man should be. Handsome with a calm confidence, intelligent with a sharp mind, and disciplined in a way that made elders nod in approval. He was raised in comfort, not spoilt, but surrounded enough to believe that life would always be steady. His father, Mr. Obi, was a man of great reputation, wealthy, respected, and admired by many. When he walked into a place, people stood up, not out of fear, but out of respect. His mother, Mrs. Obi, was softer in presence but stronger in spirit, a woman who balanced the home with grace while running her small but thriving business, always reminding her children, no matter how big we become, never forget humility. Their home was once filled with laughter, the kind that echoed through wide halls and open spaces, a large house that stood as a symbol of their success. Evenings were for family meals, shared stories, and light teasing. Ikenna, one day you will take over everything I have built, Mr. Obi would say proudly, and Ikenna would smile, replying, I will make you even prouder, Papa. Life felt certain, life felt secure. But sometimes, all it takes is one moment for everything to fall apart. It started quietly, with a business deal that seemed too good to ignore. Mr. Obi trusted the wrong man, a partner he believed shared his vision, but behind that handshake was betrayal. Money was moved, investments were made, and before anyone could understand what was happening, everything collapsed. Accounts emptied, properties seized, opportunities vanished. It was as if the ground beneath their feet had suddenly opened up. It's just a setback, Mr. Obi had said at first, trying to reassure his family, but the strain in his voice betrayed him. Days turned into weeks, and the truth became impossible to hide. He had borrowed heavily from Chief Okoye, believing he would repay easily once the investment succeeded. But now, there was nothing left, nothing to repay with. The house grew quieter with each passing day. The laughter disappeared, replaced by long stretches of silence. One evening, Ikenna walked into the sitting room and found his father seated alone, staring into nothing, his eyes empty, his shoulders heavy with defeat. Papa, are you all right? Ikenna asked gently. Mr. Obi blinked slowly, as if returning from a distant place, and forced a weak smile. I am fine, my son, he replied, but his voice carried no life. Even the younger ones noticed the change. Meals became shorter, conversations fewer. Mrs. Obi tried to stay strong, often saying, we will get through this. God will make a way. But even she could not hide the worry in her eyes. Ikenna could not sit and watch his family fall apart. He stepped up without being asked. He took extra jobs, worked longer hours, carried burdens that were never meant for him alone. Some days he left before sunrise and returned long after night had settled. You need to rest, his mother would say, concern written all over her face. We will be fine. But Ikenna would shake his head. We don't have time to rest, Mama. Not now. There were nights he skipped meals, choosing instead to send every little money he earned back home. His body grew tired, but his determination refused to break. Yet, no matter how hard he worked, no matter how much he sacrificed, the debt remained like a mountain that refused to move. Each payment felt like a drop in an endless ocean. And slowly, painfully, the reality began to settle in. Effort alone might not be enough to save them. If power had a face, it would look like Chief Okoye, a man whose name alone could silence a room, whose wealth stretched beyond what most could imagine, and whose influence bent situations in his favor without effort. He was not just rich, he was feared, respected, and obeyed. In his world, things did not delay. They happened when he wanted them to happen, and if they didn't, he made sure they did. I do not repeat myself, he often said, his voice calm but laced with authority, and I do not wait longer than necessary. Inside that same mansion of power lived a different story, one that few people ever saw. His only daughter, Amara, existed almost like a shadow within the walls of that grand house. Extremely overweight, her body had become both her shield and her prison. She rarely left her room, not because she didn't want to see the world, but because the world had never been kind to her. The whispers, the stares, the silent judgments had carved deep wounds into her heart. She spoke little, moved slowly, and avoided mirrors whenever she could. But beneath all that weight, beneath the silence and insecurity, was a mind that was sharp, thoughtful, and kind. She read often, wrote in secret, and understood people more than they understood her. Sometimes, when the house was quiet,
She would sit by the window and whisper to herself, maybe one day, someone will see me. But outside her quiet world, a storm was building. Chief Okoye was growing impatient. The debt owed to him was no longer just a financial matter, it had become an insult. He began sending warnings, sharp and direct. Tell Mr. Obi his time is running out, he instructed his men. Letters followed, then threats of legal action. Soon it escalated into public humiliation. At gatherings, meetings, even casual encounters, Chief Okoye made sure Mr. Obi's failure was known. A man who cannot keep his word is not a man, he would say loudly, ensuring others heard. The words cut deeper each time. Mr. Obi, once respected, now walked with lowered shoulders. His confidence shattered. One afternoon, unable to bear it any longer, he went to see Chief Okoye in person. The moment he entered the compound, his steps slowed, his heart heavy with both fear and desperation. He was ushered into the sitting room where Chief Okoye sat comfortably, as though he had been expecting him. "Chief, good afternoon," Mr. Obi said, softly, his voice lacking its former strength. Chief Okoye did not respond immediately. He simply looked at him, his expression unreadable. After a long pause, he spoke. "You have come with my money?" The question hung in the air like a test Mr. Obi already knew he had failed. He swallowed hard and shook his head slightly. "Chief, please, I am still trying. Things have been very difficult, but I assure you I will pay everything. I just need more time." His voice broke at the end, the weight of his situation finally spilling through. For a moment, there was silence. Then Chief Okoye leaned forward slightly, his gaze sharp, his tone cold and final. "Time?" he repeated slowly. Mr. Obi nodded quickly, almost pleading with his eyes. "Yes, Chief, just a little more time." Chief Okoye let out a short, humorless chuckle, then shook his head. "Time does not pay debts," he said flatly. The words landed with a finality that left no room for hope. Mr. Obi's shoulders dropped further, his last bit of strength slipping away as he realized that whatever mercy he had hoped for was no longer on the table.
The message came early in the morning, short and direct, carrying the weight of something unavoidable. Chief Okoye had summoned the Obi family to his mansion. No explanation, no room for delay, just an order. By the time they arrived, the atmosphere was already heavy, as though the walls themselves knew what was about to happen. They were ushered into the grand sitting room, but none of its beauty could soften the tension that filled the air. Silence sat with them, thick and suffocating. Mrs. Obi clutched her wrapper tightly, her fingers trembling. Mr. Obi stared ahead, his face pale, his mind racing with fear. Ikenna stood beside them, his jaw tight, his heart uneasy, sensing that this moment would change everything. Then Chief Okoye walked in, slow, composed, his presence commanding instant attention. He did not greet them. He did not smile. He simply sat down and looked at them one after the other, letting the silence stretch until it became unbearable. Finally, he spoke. "I believe I have been patient enough." His voice was calm, but there was no kindness in it. Mr. Obi quickly leaned forward, desperation already in his tone. "Chief, please, I am still trying. I just need a little more." "Enough," Chief Okoye cut in sharply, raising a hand. The room fell silent again. Then he leaned back slightly and said the words that shattered everything. "If the debt cannot be paid, your son will marry my daughter, Amara." For a second, no one moved, as though the words needed time to settle into reality. Then Mrs. Obi let out a loud, broken cry. "No, please, Chief, no, not that!" Tears streamed down her face as she shook her head repeatedly. Mr. B opened his mouth, but no words came out. His throat dry, his mind blank, his pride completely crushed. Ikenna stood frozen, his eyes wide, his chest rising and falling rapidly. "Marry her?"
he said slowly, disbelief and anger mixing in his voice. You want me to marry her because of a debt? Chief Okoye did not flinch. Not want, he replied coldly. That is the condition. He leaned forward, his gaze hard. 1 month. Decide, or I take everything you have left. Your house, your properties, everything. The meeting ended without another word, but the damage had already been done. When they returned home, the silence followed them, heavier than before. The house that once held warmth now felt cold, unfamiliar. No one spoke at first. They sat in the sitting room, each lost in their own thoughts, each carrying the same unbearable weight. Then, suddenly, Ikenna stood up. No, he burst out, his voice echoing through the house. I will not do it. I will not marry her. This is madness. His anger filled the room, raw and uncontrollable. Am I a commodity now? Something to be exchanged for money? Is that what I am? His parents looked at him, pain written all over their faces. Ikenna, his mother began softly, but he cut her off. No, Mama, this is too much. I have done everything. I have worked, I have sacrificed, and now this? Marriage as payment? His voice cracked slightly, but his anger remained. Mr. Obi finally spoke, his voice weak, almost broken. My son, we have no choice. No choice? Ikenna repeated bitterly. There is always a choice. But his words began to lose strength as his parents' desperation became clearer. Mrs. Obi suddenly slid off her chair and dropped to her knees before him. Please, she cried, her voice shaking uncontrollably. Please, my son, do this for us, for your siblings. If we lose this house, where will we go? What will happen to them? Ikenna froze, his anger colliding with the sight before him. Mama, stand up, he said, his voice softer now. But she shook her head, tears falling freely. I am begging you, she continued, save this family. Then, something even more shocking happened. Mr. Obi, the man who had never shown weakness, the man who had always stood strong, lowered his head and began to cry silently. No words, just quiet, broken tears. Ikenna stared at him, disbelief flooding his eyes. He had never seen his father like this before. Never. The room grew still again, but this time it was filled with something deeper than silence. It was surrender. Ikenna's chest tightened as the weight of everything pressed down on him. His pride, his anger, his dreams, all clashing with the reality in front of him. Slowly, painfully, he closed his eyes. When he opened them again, something had changed. The fight in him had dimmed. If I do this, he said quietly, his voice heavy, we keep the house? Mr. Obi nodded slowly, unable to speak. Ikenna let out a long breath as though releasing a part of himself. Then he spoke the words that would change his life forever. Fine, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I will do it. The wedding was everything money could buy. Grand, lavish, and impossible to ignore. The hall glittered with decorations, the air filled with expensive perfume and loud music, guests dressed in their finest, cameras flashing from every corner. From the outside, it looked like a celebration of love, but inside, it was something else entirely. As Ikenna stood at the altar, dressed in a perfectly tailored outfit, his face carried no joy, only a quiet heaviness that refused to hide. Beside him sat Amara, adorned like a queen, her makeup flawless, her attire breathtaking. Yet her eyes told a different story. Distant, withdrawn, almost lost. The whispers began almost immediately. Is that really the bride? Someone murmured. Ah, money has power, another replied with a soft laugh. Some tried to hide it, covering their mouths, but others did not bother. Ikenna's friends stood at the back, shaking their heads in disbelief. Love is truly blind, another added sarcastically, and they burst into quiet laughter. Even those who came to celebrate could not hide their gossip. Maybe the father forced him, a woman whispered. Or maybe the bride came with a heavy price, another replied, raising her brows. A few stepped forward to greet them, their smiles wide but fake. "Congratulations," they said, their voices sweet, but the moment they turned away, their expressions changed completely. Amara heard some of it, not all, but enough. Her fingers tightened around her bouquet as she lowered her gaze even further. This was not what she wanted. She had refused when her father first mentioned it, her voice shaking as she said, "I don't want to marry someone who does not want me." But Chief Okoye had looked at her coldly and replied, "Then you can leave my house and remain unmarried forever." She had no choice. And now, here she was, sitting beside a man who could not even look at her. The only people truly smiling were Chief Okoye and his wife, seated proudly, greeting guests, basking in what they saw as a perfect arrangement. Everything went well, his wife said softly, satisfied. Chief Okoye nodded, as it should. When the ceremony ended, he presented his gift with pride. A house, he announced, and additional properties to support their future. The crowd clapped, impressed. But the applause did nothing to fill the emptiness between the couple. They smiled for the cameras, stood side by side, but inside, they felt like strangers trapped in a decision neither of them made. That night, the house was quiet, too quiet. The excitement of the wedding did not follow them home. Ikenna walked into the living room, loosened his outfit slightly, and let out a long breath. Amara stood at a distance, unsure, uncomfortable. For a moment, it felt like one of them should speak, but no words came. Finally, Ikenna cleared his throat softly. "You can take the room upstairs," he said without looking at her. Amara nodded slightly. "Okay." That was all. No welcome, no conversation, just distance. That night, they slept in separate rooms, separated not just by walls, but by everything unspoken between them. Days turned into weeks, and nothing changed. The house remained silent, filled with the sound of footsteps, but no laughter. They avoided each other naturally, like two people who had learned to exist without crossing paths. In the mornings, one would leave the dining table just as the other arrived. "Good morning," Amara once said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. Ikenna responded without looking up, already walking away. Awkward encounters became routine, brief, uncomfortable, empty. They ate separately, lived separately, and spoke only when necessary. But beneath the silence, beneath the distance, was a truth neither of them admitted. They were both hurting, both forced into a life they did not choose, both misunderstood, carrying pain that words had not yet found a way to express. And in that quiet house, two strangers lived as husband and wife, bound together yet completely alone.
One quiet afternoon, when the house felt heavier than usual, Ikenna found himself watching Amara without meaning to. She was in the sitting room, moving slowly as she arranged a few things on the table, her steps careful, her breathing slightly uneven, but there was something else in the way she carried herself, something calm, something gentle. He stayed still, unnoticed, his eyes following her movements. Then he saw it, the way she paused to pick up a fallen cloth and neatly folded it, the way she adjusted a chair that wasn't even out of place, the way she whispered softly to herself as if keeping her own company. It wasn't loud, it wasn't dramatic, but it was kind. There was a quiet strength in her, the kind that didn't need attention. For the first time, Ikenna looked beyond her weight, really looked, and what he saw unsettled him. Her face, though often hidden, held a softness that was almost graceful. Her eyes, when they briefly lifted, carried depth, intelligence, and something broken that he had never cared to notice before. He felt something shift inside him, something uncomfortable. What if, he thought slowly, his chest tightening, what if I've been seeing this all wrong? The thought refused to leave. It stayed with him, followed him, echoed in his mind until it became impossible to ignore. That evening, He sat alone for a long time, staring into space just like his father once did. But this time, it wasn't defeat he felt. It was realization. Slowly, he exhaled and shook his head. "This is my life now," he muttered to himself. "I can either hate it or make something out of it." And in that moment, he made a decision, quiet but powerful. He would change his mindset. He would stop seeing Amara as a punishment and start seeing her as a person. The next day, he did something he had never done before. He called her. "Amara?" His voice sounded unfamiliar, even to himself. She froze where she stood, her body stiff, her heart suddenly racing. For a second, she wasn't sure she heard correctly. Slowly, she turned to face him. "Yes," she replied softly, her voice cautious, almost fragile. There was silence again, thick and awkward, both of them unsure how to begin. Ikena cleared his throat, shifting slightly. Can we talk?" he asked, avoiding her eyes. Amara hesitated, then nodded. "Okay." They sat, not too close, not too far. The space between them filled with years of unspoken tension, compressed into weeks. Ikena rubbed his palms together briefly, searching for the right words. "I've been thinking," he finally said, his voice steady but careful. Amara said nothing, her eyes fixed on him, waiting. He took a breath. "I think we can make things better, for both of us." She frowned slightly, confused. "Better?" she repeated quietly. He nodded. "Yes, I mean, this situation, it doesn't have to remain like this." He paused, then continued more gently now. "Amara, you are not as people see you." The word surprised her. She blinked, unsure of what he meant. Then he said it. "I think you can become healthier, stronger, not just for appearance, but for yourself. And I want to help you." The words hung in the air, heavy and unexpected. Amara stared at him, her expression changing slowly from confusion to shock. "You want to help me?" she asked, her voice almost breaking. Ikena nodded, this time looking at her directly. "Yes." She looked away quickly, her chest rising and falling as emotions she had buried for years began to surface. Doubt crept in immediately. "You think it's that easy?" she said, a hint of pain slipping into her voice. "Do you think I haven't tried?" Ikena leaned forward slightly. "I didn't say it would be easy," he replied calmly, "but I believe it's possible." She shook her head slowly, her eyes glistening. "People always say things like this," she whispered. "They don't understand." There was a brief silence, then Ikena spoke again, softer this time. "Then let me understand." That single sentence broke through something inside her. She looked at him again, really looked this time, searching his face for mockery, for pity, for anything that would confirm her fears. But there was none. Just sincerity, just calm determination. Her lips trembled slightly, and for the first time, something unfamiliar stirred within her. Not fear, not shame, but a small, fragile spark of hope. The next morning marked the beginning of something neither of them fully understood, but both had quietly agreed to try. Training began slowly, awkwardly, uncertain. Ikena stood in the compound, hands on his waist like a determined coach, while Amara stood a few steps away, already breathing like she had run a marathon without moving an inch. "We'll start small," Ikena said calmly. "Just walking." Amara frowned immediately. "Walking? I am already tired," she complained, placing a hand on her chest dramatically. Ikena raised a brow. "You haven't even started." She sighed loudly. "That is exactly why I am tired." For the first time, a faint smile tried to escape Ikena's lips, but he held it back. "Let's go," he said, gesturing forward. The first few steps were slow, heavy, uncomfortable. Then came the jogging attempt. "Jog!" Amara repeated, her eyes widening. "You want me to run?" Already shaking her head.
Just try, he encouraged. She took 2 steps, then 3, then stopped abruptly, holding her waist. I cannot breathe, she cried dramatically. I am seeing my ancestors. Ekena let out a small laugh this time. Your ancestors will wait. Keep moving. Despite her complaints, she tried again and again, each attempt slightly better than the last. Days turned into routines, mornings became for exercise, evenings for stretching, and meals slowly changed from heavy portions to healthier choices. This food has no taste, Amara grumbled one afternoon, staring at her plate. It has purpose, Ekena replied simply. I prefer taste over purpose, she shot back, but still ate it. The journey was far from easy. There were days her body ached so badly she could barely move. Days she sat down mid-exercise, tears slipping down her cheeks. I can't do this, she whispered one evening, frustration and pain mixing in her voice. It's too hard. Ekena crouched slightly in front of her, his voice calm but firm. Yes, it is hard, but you are harder than this. She shook her head weakly. You don't understand. Then help me understand, he replied gently, echoing the words that had first opened her heart. He never forced her, never shouted, never gave up on her. Each day, he showed up. One more step, he would say. One more try. Even when she failed, even when she cried, he stayed. And slowly, something began to change. Not just in her body, but between them. The silence that once filled the house began to fade. Conversations grew, small at first, then longer. Laughter, though rare, started to find its way back. You are wicked, Amara said one day after a tough session, breathing heavily. How? Ekena asked, folding his arms. Because you will not let me rest, she replied, trying not to smile. That is because you can do more than you think, he said. And for once, she believed him. Weeks turned into months and the transformation slowly revealed itself. The weight began to drop, not overnight, but steadily, consistently. Her movements became lighter, her posture stronger. The same woman who once avoided mirrors now stood in front of one, staring at her reflection in disbelief. Is this me? She whispered softly. Her face had changed, her features now clear, defined, radiant. Confidence replaced insecurity. Elegance replaced hesitation. She didn't just look different, she felt different. Ekena stood behind her one day, watching quietly as she adjusted her dress. There was pride in his eyes, something deep and genuine. You did this, he said softly. Amara turned slightly, shaking her head. We did this, she corrected. And in that moment, they both smiled, not out of obligation, but from something real. When they stepped out together, the world reacted instantly. Heads turned, conversations stopped mid-sentence. Is that Amara? Someone whispered in disbelief. Impossible, another replied, staring. The same people who once laughed now watched in shock, their expressions filled with confusion, admiration, and something else. Jealousy. Ikena's friends, who once mocked him, could barely hide their reactions. Guy, now your wife be that? One asked, eyes wide. Ekena simply nodded, calm but proud. And as Amara walked beside him, confident, graceful, and stunning, it became clear to everyone. This was no longer the same story they once laughed at.
The day they decided to visit her parents, the air carried a quiet anticipation, the kind that comes before something unforgettable. As their car rolled into Chief Okoye's compound, the guards opened the gates without hesitation, but none of them were prepared for what was about to step out. Ekena came down first, calm as always. Then he turned and gently held out his hand. Amara stepped out, elegant, confident, her presence commanding attention in a way no one had ever seen before. The workers nearby paused, their eyes widening, whispers already beginning. Who is that? One asked under his breath.
Inside the house, Chief Okoye sat comfortably, unaware, until a maid rushed in, slightly out of breath. "Sir, they are here." He nodded slowly. "Let them come in." Moments later, footsteps echoed through the hallway, steady, confident. Chief Okoye lifted his gaze and froze. His eyes moved from Ikenna, then to the woman standing beside him. He frowned deeply, confusion taking over his face. "Ikenna," he said slowly, rising to his feet. "Who is this?" There was a brief pause, then he added with a half-serious tone, "Did you bring another woman into my house?" Ikenna couldn't help the small smile that formed on his lips. "Chief, look well," he said calmly. Chief Okoye looked again, this time more carefully. His eyes scanned her face, searching, doubting, until recognition hit him like a sudden storm. His breath caught. "Amara?" he whispered, his voice filled with disbelief. Amara smiled softly, her eyes slightly emotional. "Yes, Papa." For a moment, Chief Okoye said nothing. He simply stared, his expression slowly changing from shock to wonder to overwhelming pride. Then he stepped forward quickly, his voice rising with emotion. "Ah, this is my daughter. This is my Amara." He turned to his wife, who had also come out, equally stunned. "Look at her. Look at our daughter." His wife covered her mouth, tears already forming. "Amara," she called softly, pulling her in a warm embrace. The room filled with emotion, pride, and something deeper, gratitude. Chief Okoye turned to Ikenna, his eyes now holding a respect that had never been there before. "What you have done," he began, shaking his head slightly, "is beyond what money can buy." He walked closer, placing a firm hand on Ikenna's shoulder. "If you can transform my daughter like this, then you are a man who can transform anything." His voice grew stronger, decisive. "From today, you will handle my business. Everything. I trust you." Ikenna's eyes widened slightly, surprised by the weight of those words. But Chief Okoye was not done. "And your father," he continued, "I will restore him. He will stand again." True to his word, he provided the support Mr. Obi needed to rebuild his life, not as a debtor, but as a man given a second chance. And just like that, what once threatened to destroy two families became the very thing that united them. The bitterness faded, replaced by respect, understanding, and renewed friendship. Mr. Obi stood tall again, his confidence returning, his home filled once more with dignity. Ikenna and Amara's marriage blossomed into something neither of them had expected. Love grew, not forced, not demanded, but built through patience, sacrifice, and understanding. They respected each other deeply, their bond now unbreakable. The house that once echoed with silence now overflowed with laughter, warmth, and peace. And then came the greatest joy of all. Amara gave birth to a set of twin boys, their cries filling the home with new life. More children followed, each one a reminder of how far they had come. Their family became a symbol of transformation, of hope, of what is possible when people choose growth over resentment. And as the years passed, one truth remained clear. Sometimes life forces you into situations, not to destroy you, but to transform you. True beauty goes beyond appearance. First beginnings can lead to genuine love. Patience, discipline, and kindness can transform lives, and what feels like punishment can become purpose.